Pressure is also mounting within the president's party and his executive for him to step aside pending the outcome of the Phala Phala probe. He is tourism minister and a contender for the party presidency. Lindiwe Sisulu wants President Ramaphosa to step aside. At the same time, Sisulu's spokesperson Steve Motale has also laid into the president's spokesperson, accusing him of meddling in ANC internal matters. And of course, today is that deadline for the president to make submissions to the independent panel in Parliament, and former President Kgalema Motlanthe saying that the president's silence on this particular matter communicates a certain message, and he was speaking to the Sunday Times. Let's now speak to ATM leader Vuyo Zungula and DA Chief Whip Siviwe Gwarube, who are joining us this afternoon. Thank you so much to you both for your time. I'll start with you, Vuyo. Do you know if the president has submitted?
At the moment, we have no information on that. The independent panel, if you recall, does not issue out statements or communicate with the public. And the president's spokesperson gave information that they will meet the deadline, which is something that they've said even with the other agencies that are investigating, even though later on they went on and requested extension. So as things stand now, there is no information whether he has complied with that deadline or not.
And what happens then if he misses it?
If he misses it, the rules of parliament must apply, because if we as members of opposition parties were given an opportunity to submit information and we did not, then the panel would have continued with the information that is before them. Therefore, the same thing must happen if President Ramaphosa does not submit, then the independent panel must continue making a determination based on the information that is before them, because they would have given him an opportunity to state his case, but he elected not to do so.
And Siviwe will be joining us a little later on for this conversation. Vuyo, the rules, of course, don't ask for a direct face-to-face engagement, and some have seen this as a challenge, saying that they would have preferred that the president makes a physical representation. Where do you stand on that?
Look, from our side, that is not really, something that we can hold ourselves on, because what we view is the submissions that are going to be made, and the submissions that were made by us as the ATM to initiate this, and the supplementary information was adequate for the independent panel to check if there's a prima facie case. Remember, the purpose of the panel is not to judge anyone guilty. Rather, it is to determine if there is a prima facie case for the president to be impeached. Therefore, with the information that is before them, that is enough. It does not need for the president to physically go there, make a physical representation. Based on the written submissions he would have made, that would be enough for the panel to make a determination.
And I wonder, what are your thoughts on this one? Because there are quite a number of probes that are going on when it comes to the Phala Phala matter. And I see Siviwe has now joined us. Maybe Siviwe, thank you so much. You should take this one. There are several probes into the Phala Phala matter, and we are still none the wiser as to what are they finding. And some people have been saying that the public protector by now should have made the findings public. Let's talk about that. Why these particular delays? Are you even getting answers as political parties?
Well, good evening, everybody, and good evening to your viewers. I mean, and this has been the predicament, particularly as political parties, that we have faced when it comes to the scandal. Because, of course, as members of parliament, it is our job and our duty to hold the president to account, as well as his entire cabinet. And that's why for the latter half of this year, we have been posing questions in the House. We've brought debates in the House. We've requested the Speaker to institute an ad hoc committee to investigate not only the president, but also the people and those who are implicated around him. The ATM has initiated this Section 89 process. And all of these things, Bongiwe, point to at least the opposition members' desire to see that there is accountability, and that it doesn't matter who you are in South Africa, and that if you are found of wrongdoing, or at least alleged to have done wrongdoing, and of course the president has admitted to some of these things, but we are yet to see a coherent account as to what has happened and what laws have been broken. And so we are looking at this process very carefully. And considering the fact that the deadline is today, we would have expected the Speaker to communicate to say, even if the panel is not prepared to make the contents of the President's submission public, but we would have expected the Speaker to communicate to say that, in fact, he has met the deadline. Because you see, Bongiwe, it's also important that the integrity of this process is respected. And that falls within the ambit of the Speaker to make sure that she's not kowtowing to the President's own timeline, that Parliament has instituted a process. The President ought to respect that process. And we need to know that, in fact, that deadline has been met.
I wonder, there's something interesting that you say about making the president's submissions public. How much of that would be in the interest of transparency, particularly given what we saw in the past? I don't know if you'd recall where the former public protector, Advocate Thuli Madonsela, had to make the conversation with the former President Jacob Zuma public. So would it be in the interest of transparency for us to see potentially what the president had to say to Parliament?
Look, absolutely. And I think eventually what I'm saying is that we're not prepared to, it's not the hill we're prepared to die on to say if his responses are not made public now, then it means the whole process is fraught. Of course, eventually his responses must be made public, because we have to be able to see that, in fact, the panel looked at this kind of information, and it is on the basis of this information that they've reached a conclusion. So ultimately, those responses must be made public. The deliberations of that panel must be made public, so that we can also all accept whatever the conclusion they come to. We can accept that due diligence was done and that the information was scrutinized, that the president was also open and transparent about what happened on his Phala Phala farm. Because what we can't see happen again is the fact that Parliament continues to be relegated to a rubber stamping institution, as we have seen by the executive. And that kind of culture is what led to state capture and what we saw being a complete rampant corruption of state institutions. So we cannot allow that to happen. So we would need to see those responses made public.
Especially when you look at even some of the harsh words that Parliament, had to even get from the state capture report, and really almost signaling that Parliament was potentially sleeping on the job. Now, Vuyo, looking at the probes that are underway right now, inclusive of this one in Parliament, let's talk about the ones that we've seen before. I mean, the Public Protector, the Reserve Bank, and all of that. What do the delays mean for accountability?
Firstly, it shows that the president has got something that he wants to hide in the entire process. Because firstly, it took a whistleblower to actually make the issue about Phala Phala to be public knowledge. If it was dependent on the president, what happened in Phala Phala, the money lost and everything concerning Phala Phala would have been not become public knowledge. Secondly, the investigations, you find that the president has countless times asked for endless extensions, even going as far as being threatened by subpoena by the Office of the Public Protector for him to answer. And I think that is the first time that it has happened in our democracy, that a president has to be threatened by Chapter 9 institution for him to comply. He went to Parliament, he refused to answer a question on Phala Phala, even though the rules of Parliament dictate that he must answer. Therefore, when you look at this on the lens of accountability, it means the president on this particular issue is not a person that could be trusted on the lens of accountability, because he's tried everything to delay accountability, to try and avoid accountability. Hence, we have faith now more in this independent panel, because it is not people that are appointed by the president. It is not Parliament, which is a majority of the party that is led by the president. It is a semi-judicial body, and that should be entrusted to be independent.
And Siviwe, the Sunday Times today reporting, I'm sure you've seen that former President Kgalema Motlanthe says the president's refusal to provide a full explanation communicates a certain message. And he says that this gives rise to all manner of speculation, views and suspicions, and says that as a president, an executive head, as they say, you need to be unimpeachable. And if doubts sets in and suspicion sets in and all manner of speculation arises, it is not good. How much should the president have shared with the nation of what happened on his farm, given the fact that when you as MPs have been asking questions, the president says that he would like to give the probes time?
Yes, and Bongi, you'll remember that when this matter became public knowledge, we were told that in fact this incident had taken place 2 years ago. So immediately you have a situation that the president was not transparent about who was involved in the cover-up of what allegedly took place on his farm, and he has yet to provide compelling responses to some of the grave allegations which have come to the fore. He has now, after numerous attempts to ask him what has happened, he has confirmed that in fact a theft did take place. But now, of course, if you have handled this so poorly, and in my view, you have bungled this entire thing so badly, what you now need to do is you need to play open cards. And in my view, there is no better place like this institution that holds you to account to actually play open cards. And so it's been incredibly disappointing on many levels. Number one, that the president has refused point blank. In fact, if you remember the question and answer session that took place, I think several weeks ago, where the president said, I wish I could respond, but I can't respond to the question. And we fought hard as opposition parties to say, well, the president himself said he didn't answer the question. And it was through the efforts of opposition parties that, in fact, we got to pose the question again. But he did not provide any new information that was not in the public domain or take us into his confidence, number one. Number two, we've got a situation where ANC MPs are rendering Parliament absolutely inefficient, where regardless of whether or not the request for information is legit and valid, the reality is that people coalesce around party lines as opposed to what is right. Because an institution that works, Bongiwe, would be one that says, regardless of the fact that you belong to our own political party, we as a separate institution, as a separate arm of state, we expect to hold you to account and you've got to be held accountable. And so now you've got a situation where, of course, he has now has not taken the public into his confidence. And there are now two options that are available in the Constitution. One, a motion of no confidence against him, and number two, an impeachment process against him. And now the Section 89 process has started a process now, Bongiwe, where whatever the outcomes of that process, it could very well start an impeachment process if he is found to have violated any of the laws in South Africa. And so really, for me, the president should have really led by example, really played open cards. He had 2 years to figure out his story before this matter became public knowledge. And he owes South Africans really an explanation as to why it is that when a theft happens at your house, you don't go and report it to the South African Police Service, but instead, state apparatus is used to conduct covert investigations into your personal theft matter. And that, for me, remains a really sticking point, especially as a president who has committed to cleaning out the rot in government. That does not indicate to me that is somebody who is leading by example.
All right. Thank you to you both for your time. Let's see then if we do get a statement or an update from Parliament on whether or not the submissions have been made and where things stand on that one, because the president's spokesperson last week saying that the president will be meeting this deadline. So let's see what happens on that particular matter. And remember, the Section 89 independent panel will formally start its assessment of all the submissions on Monday. So let's see what happens. That's Vuyo Zungula, ATM leader, and Siviwe Gwarube, who is the DA's chief whip. And of course, we'll continue to bring you more developments on this particular story.